Hey Uki Bandit, so here we are in this second video of this wonderful adventure, Theory for Ukulele, and we're going to be looking at scales. Obviously, if you've got the first video under your belt and you understand we've got 12 notes in music and you can work those 12 notes out on ukulele, that would be beneficial. As we're going to be delving into the scale system, what scale to learn, what is a scale, why do you need to learn it, and we'll look at some uses of the scale which should be quite fun for you to apply on the ukulele. So here we go. Okay, so what is a scale? Well, a scale quite simply is a pattern of notes, and if we take what we've learned from the previous video is there's 12 notes in music and we play from the lowest note to the highest note and we play them back down again in order of pitch, we'd be playing the chromatic scale. In the major scale we'd be playing from 1 to 8. There's 8 notes that we're going to be playing and we go play them up and down in pitch, and that is what a scale is. So let's look at the major scale. We've got here 1 to 8, and this is quite important to start with because that means octave. 1 to 8 notes. Usually when you hear someone play up an octave or down octave, they're talking about the major scale. They're talking about the scale system 1 to 8, and oct obviously meaning 8. So that if you ever hear that terminology, that's what it relates to. We're going to be looking at building it to start with. So if we take the major scale formula and we've got 1 to 8, we know there's 8 notes. Then we've got these letters written underneath. So you've got W, W, H, W, 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 H. These actually mean whole step. So W means whole step and H means half step. And if we look at the ukulele, you can see we've got frets. And just like the piano on a keyboard here, which we learnt last time, if we go every note, which we know is chromatic, is actually what we call half step. So if I go from a C to the black note, which is the next note in pitch, that's a half step. Well, on the ukulele, if we take our A string and then we go A sharp, which is the next note, as you can see in the chromatic scale, that is a half step. So going up a fret at a time, we're going up in series of half steps. So going up 1 fret, we call that a half step. If we go 2 frets, we're calling them whole steps. And that's obviously, if you learnt that in the first video about the idea of when music was first created, they would have 12 notes, but they would only use certain ones, and whole steps were more used. So half steps are those notes in between. That's where those black notes come from. I did explain it a bit in that first video, so hopefully that should make sense. But what we're going to be looking at really is replicating this pattern. So we've got 1 to 8, we know we've got 8 notes, and we now know that we've got a series of whole and half steps. Okay, so for example, what we're going to do is we're going to take first note of the scale, and all I'm going to do for this is I'm going to place my first finger on the 2nd fret. Now I don't really care about the name of the note at this point, I just want to make the pattern of the major scale using this formula, and if you can do that, that's a good starting point. So we've got the 2nd fret with the first finger pushed down on that note, and then we look at our diagram and it says 1, and then we've got this W which joins to the 2. Now that means for our next note, the 2nd note of the scale, we're going to go a whole step, and as we just learned, a whole step is 2 frets. So I shift it up to 2 frets. So I'm now going to the 4th fret, so the 2nd note of the scale is on the 4th fret. Now we've got a W then that's joining the 2 to the 3, so I know for my 3rd note of the scale I'm going to go up another whole step. So now I know I go to the 6. So I know my first note started on 2, and then I went a whole step to find my 2nd note, and then for my 3rd note I'm going up a whole step to 6. Now when I want to play the next note, you can see we've got a half step, and a half step, as we learned earlier, was 1 fret. So the 6 goes to a 7, so that's my 4th note of the scale. Then I've got my 4th note joining to the 5th, so I'm going to find the 5th note of the scale by going up a whole step. So I'm going from my 7 to my 9. Now we're going to go to the 6th note of the scale, and that's a whole step as well. So we're going to go from the 9 to 11. And then we're going to find the 7th note of the scale, which is another whole step. And we're going to go from 11 to 13th fret there. And then finally our last note, you can see it says a half step. So from our 7th note of the scale to the 8th note of the scale, is a half step, and then we will land on, basically, if you look at the note that we started on, which incidentally is a B, and then the one we finished on is a B as well, except for it's an octave higher. In other words, it's 8 notes in the scale, so the 8th note of the scale is the same note you started on, but in the pitch that's higher. And we learnt about the pitches and like doubling and halving pitches to create the same note but a higher frequency in the last video, so I'm not going to really explain that bit. So we've got our major scale, and that was through just understanding this formula, just knowing that we've got 8 notes and in what order those whole and half steps occur. So you could learn it whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now the other terminology that you might hear used, because there's always a few different terminologies that are used for these things, is tone and semitone. And if you've heard that before, it just means the same thing. So a tone is the same as a whole step, and a semitone is the same as a half step. It's up to you which one you prefer using. This one, I quite like using this one purely because whole and half step, it's the distance that you're traveling, and semitone and tone is a bit more of a musical terminology. So whatever suits you really, it doesn't really matter as long as you arrive at the same conclusion. So we're going to make up now another scale, but we're going to make the C major scale, and we're going to do this on the C string. So we're actually going to use notes this time. So the C major scale starts on a C, and we're going to go up in the same series of steps. We're going to work it out together. And if you get to this point and you go wrong, you're not quite sure, obviously just go back to this starting point right now and work it through with me, and you might need to do that a few times. So we're going to start off with C note. So we're on the 3rd string, the C note of the ukulele, and we know that's the first note. Incidentally as well as being called number 1, it's sometimes referred to as the root note, because it's the first note. It's also the note that names the scale. So this is the C major scale, and this is the C note. This is our root of the scale, the root note. It's another term that is worthwhile knowing. Okay, so what we're going to do is build the C major scale. To do this, we first of all find the C note, and we're going to use a C string for this, the 3rd string. So there's the C string. That's going to be the start of our scale, and that's quite important. The start note is usually referred to as the root note of the scale, because that's the note that names the scale, and that's number 1 in our scale. And then we're going to go up the fretboard in our whole and half step system. So we're going to go, first note is C, and then we're going to go to our 2nd note of the scale, which is a whole step up. So if you remember, 2 notes is a whole step. So if the chromatic scale, or 12 notes in music, goes C, C sharp, D, then we started on C, then we know we go C, C sharp being 1 note up, D. That's our next note. In case of frets, we're going to go open as a C, C sharp, D. There's our D. Then we're going to go up another whole step for our 3rd note of the scale, D, D sharp, E. So our 3rd note of the scale is E. And then we're going to go to the 4th note of the scale, which is a half step. For this, we only go up 1 fret, E goes to F. Then we're going to go up a whole step again, which is 2 frets, F, F sharp, G. And then we're going to go up a whole step for the next note, which is the 6th note of the scale, G, G sharp, A. And then we're going to have a whole step again, A sharp, B. That's our 7th note in the scale. And finally the last note, the octave above, we're going to land on the C. So the C is on the 12th fret. So the pattern would be whole, 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 and then we've got half, whole, 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 half. So the first note being a whole, 2nd note, we're going to go to the 3rd note, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that is literally 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. And that makes our C major scale, because we started on C and then played that pattern, the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So first of all, I'd suggest just doing that a few times on the C scale, going up and down, making sure that you can build that scale and you understand the pattern. It will be very, very, very useful, and it'll make it a lot more easier for you to understand the scale and the key system when we move to the next level, if you've got that bit down. So yeah, definitely spend a bit of time on that. Okay, so assuming you're going to spend a little bit of time first of all just making that C major scale on one string, where you're going to start with the C note, which is the open C, and then you're going to go whole step, which is 2 frets, whole step, 2 frets, half step 1, whole step 2, whole step 2 frets up, whole step 2 frets up, half step. So that's how you make your major scale on one string. The next bit is learning the notes. So that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to write it down in front of you so you can see it. And we're going to go C, which is our C string, our first note of the scale. Now if we look at the diagram above, this one up here with the chromatic scale, the 12 notes of music, you can use this instead of doing it on the fretboard. So we're going to go C, then we're going to go 2 notes up, which is a whole tone. So a whole tone is 2 notes or 2 frets, and we would land C on C sharp, then D would land on the D note. So we know that the second note of the scale is a D. So 2 notes up, 2 frets up is a D. And then we're going to go up 2 more notes, or basically 2 frets, which is a whole step. So if you go D, D sharp, E, you land on E. Then we're going to go up a half step. So if you look at this chromatic scale, you can see here that one note goes from E to F. So if we just go up 1 fret, we're landing on an F note. I'll just get that in the right place. There you go. There's an F. Then we're going to go up another whole step. So we've got first note C, second note D, third note E, then our half step to F. And now we're going to go up to our 5th note of the scale, and that is, if we look at the chromatic scale up here, F, F sharp, G. 2 notes, 2 frets is a G. So let's write that in. G. There you go. So we've now got C, D, E, F, G, the 5th note of the scale being G. We're now going to look at going up 2 frets again, and that's a whole step again. And you can see on the chromatic scale, the bit on the sheet at the top, it goes G, G sharp, and A. And then we're going to go up 2 notes again, or 2 frets again, and land on the B. And then we get to well, that's on the 7th note now. So now we're going from our 7th note to the 8th note. And if you look here, going from a B, going up just 1 fret or a half tone, we should land on a C. So there you go. We've now got our C major scale in just notes. So we've worked out the steps, the formula, if you like, to the major scale. We know this is a really popular scale, and I'm going to be able to show you some examples of this as we go along. And we know it's the foundation to understanding chords and keys. So just from this moment in time, all you really want to do is be able to build the major scale. Start with this formula. Make sure you understand building it. Make sure you understand the system going from whole, whole, half, whole, half, and that it relates to the notes. So you know that if you start on a C and you go up 2 frets, that you're playing a D. And if you can then recreate that scale and then learn the notes, so instead of going 1 to 8 or whole, half, half, just learn the notes names, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, then we're on to a winner so far. That's the next step. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our C major scale and we're going to look at it. I'm just going to go to another sheet and we're going to build the C major scale in a very useful pattern. We're going to look at applying this to the ukulele in a way that will be much more useful to us than playing it up and down in one string. So bear with me. Okay, so I've just quickly switched to this other program where I can write down the notes for you in a way that was much more useful for playing ukulele. So we're going to play the scale, what I call a cross string. So instead of on the same string playing up and down those frets, we're going to take those notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C and arrange them on the ukulele in a way that's close to all these chords. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to be able to play little riffs and musical themes or patterns in amongst playing these chords. So if you know C, F, G and A minor and you've learned to play those quite well, then we can start to use the scale that those chords are made from to play little bits in between. I will show you some examples toward the end of the video, but for now let's just play the scale across strings. So for this, what we do is we're going to just arrange it on the tablature there. So we've got our open C note, which is on the 3rd string, so that's a C. Now I'm leaving the stave above there so you can see it in the musical notation as well, but the standard staff if you like, but I don't really want you to get hooked up on, you know, which one to learn. Just whatever works for you. This is the idea, is just learning this on the ukulele. So having a way of understanding the C scale visually is quite important, but it should be in here and you should be able to replicate it on the ukulele. So I will play through it and show you this at the end, so you've got a little bit more of a visual representation of me playing it. For now I'm just going to go through it. So C, then our 2nd fret, like we did on 1 string, that's a D on the 2nd fret. Now instead of going up further along into 4, which is quite far away from that 1st note and we want it to be playable, we're going to play the E on the open 2nd string. So as you can see on the tuning up here, the 2nd string open is an E. So instead of playing the E on the same string, we're going to play E on the string below. Then we're going to play the F, so C, D, E, F. The F is on the 1st fret. The G will be on the 2nd string, so that's on the 3rd fret. And now we're going to move for our A to the A string. Then we're going to play our B there and our C finally there. Now that gives us, so on the 3rd string, C string, open 2nd fret. So this is me visually playing it now for you. So open C, D. Now if I play the next note, which is an E, so rather than playing it up to the 4th fret, I'm going to play it on the string below. Open E, 1st fret F, 3rd fret G, open A, B, C. So that's how you play the scale on the ukulele across strings in a pattern that's a lot more useful if you want to apply this to your chords that you've learned already. And there's so many cool things you can do with this scale once you've got it under your fingers. Okay, so we're going to visually look at playing that C major scale now. So if I take the open note, which is a C string, I'm now going to go to the 2nd fret, which is what we did before when we played it on 1 string, and play the D. So open to C string, now on the 2nd fret that's a D. Then I'm going to play it, instead of moving it up to the 4th fret, I'm actually going to play on the E string, because that's the next note, C, D, E. E is on the 2nd string open, and that means I'm going to play F on the 1st fret. G would be then on the 3rd fret, and now we're going to move to the open string, which is an A, so the A string open on the 1st string, and then a B, and then finally our last note an octave higher, the C. So go through that once more. We've got open C, 2nd fret, then move down to the E string, open, that's an E, F on the 1st fret, G on the 3rd, then move down a string, open, so we're now on an A string, 2nd fret B, 3rd fret C, and that is a C scale. Now you're going to cross strings, which is why it's called a cross string scale, but you're going in a much practical and useful way for playing on the ukulele, especially as a lot of our chords, C, F, G, A minor, which are where this scale originates, or these chords originate from, much more useful, because we can then throw that scale in little melodies or riffs or patterns that are very, very, very cool if you've got that pattern obviously in that area where those chords are. So the basic principle is, if you can learn the scale and you can learn it in that form, going up and down, and what I would do is play it as a warm-up. So you're just going to literally get your fingers used to the pattern. The first time you do it, it's going to take you a while to go up and down. Just do it once, up and down. And as you start to feel like you're getting used to the pattern and you're starting to not have to work so hard at working out where to play, then basically just get more fluent with it. Do it a few times over as a warm-up, and keep practicing playing it like you would do when you were practicing chords, because scales are where our melodies come from, our little riffs, our little patterns, fills. You hear all these terms being used, and if you got good at playing C, F, G and A minor, and then you get good at this scale, you can then apply those little riffs, fills and patterns into your playing. It's like the next level, the next step, and it can be very rewarding. And it literally is you spending time learning the scale, sitting with it and practicing it. And if you do it as a little warm-up just to get those fingers moving, it won't take you long. It'll be a matter of weeks before you'll be able to start to use it, actually use it in your playing. So, and the more you practice it, the better you get, obviously. So that is a C major scale across strings. We're next going to look at obviously applying it and doing a bit more with it. So let's do that. Okay, so what I've got here is the C major scale written above the notation and the tablature. So we've got our notes here, open to C, D, and then on the second string, which is E, F and G, which is open first fret and third fret, and then we've got our A, B, C, which is open second fret, third fret. So we've got it written out a scale now, so you should really learn these as notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Always play it ascending, descending, so once you get used to it, just playing up towards the first string, the A string, go backwards. And it'll be with exactly the same fingering. And the best fingering to use is the same finger as the fret. So every time we play a note on the first fret, we use the first finger. If we play a note on the second fret, we're going to use the second finger, third fret, third finger, and then finally fourth fret would be the little finger, the fourth finger there. And so if I was playing this scale, you can see it written out 02, 01, 3, 02, 3. Well, it'd be the same fingers. So it'd be the open, no fingers, 0, second finger, second fret, open, first finger, first fret, third finger, third fret, open finger, and open, no finger, second finger, second fret, third fret, third finger. So 02, 01, 3, 02, 3, and learn them as notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Play it backwards, ascending, descending. That'd be the best thing to do. Learn that scale, get really familiar to it. And so what I'm going to do now is look at an example of something very familiar, something that we've all heard of and played. But it's very common in the ukulele group. So we've got Three Little Birds by Bob Marley. Now, it's always going to be played, so because it's a fun song, it's very simple, a lot of beginners can play it, and it's a happy song. So we've got here C chord. This riff is played over a C chord, and then we've got the notes written above, C, D, C, G, E, D, C. So you can see it's used, the notes are being used from that C major scale, and you can see the frets. If we look at the frets, 02, 03, you can see 02, open and third fret. So you can see the frets that are being used are the same as well. So we've got our C. This is how the riff goes. So you've got open, which is C, D on the second fret, open and C on that's on the third string, and then we're going to go down now to the third fret on the second string, or the E string, and play our G. So the first part, C, D, C, G, and there's a gap, and then we're going to play E, which is open on that second string, the E string, and then we're going to go back now to our third string or C string and play D, C. So put it together, it goes C, D, C, G, E, D, C. And that's our little riff that you hear in between. If I put it with a chord, it should sound something like this. Now, you're not going to play the chord and the riff at the same time, but if you've got someone doing this, or just a basic offbeat reggae rhythm underneath, that just played over the C chord. and that's just played. You can hear it. I'm just kind of putting it with the chord there, just to show an example of how it would sound. It'd sound even better if the riff was played separate and the chords were played separate. So if you've got a group and some of you have learnt that riff and apply it, it would sound awesome. It would be more effective, and that is where the scales are really useful. If you're learning the scales, you can play little riffs and melodies and little cool things over the top of the chords. And if there's a group of you, even better, so you're not all doing the same thing and bashing out the chords. You could have some people playing little riffs and little melodies and things like that. So get used to the scale, play the scale. This is one example, and I think I will do a follow-up video on some cool. There's lots of ways of applying that C major scale. You can do it within the chord, you can do it separate, you can make up your own little riffs. There's lots of famous riffs and tunes and melodies and patterns that you can learn with that one scale that you can throw into the songs that you're learning quite easily. So, but because there's so many, I don't want to put it on this video. This is just an example, and so that's why I think I'll do a follow-up video with some other examples, so then you can pick one or two that you might like, because if you learn those, it's helping you learn to play the C scale and play all these techniques as well. So that's a good example. That's the Three Little Birds riff. It's using the C major scale. You can see the notes and the pattern are within that scale we learned, and that scale that we've learned, the major scale, is within that chromatic scale. And this is all part of understanding what you're playing and how you and why you want to learn these things, because obviously if so far you've learned C, F, G and A minor and maybe a few other chords, and you might have learned a few little patterns, but kind of understanding what else you can do and what the next step would be getting the chords and the scales linked together so that you can combine them to make more interesting sounds, really. So hopefully you enjoy that, and like I said, I will do a follow-up, and I would go over this video a few times if there's anything you're not quite sure of, and obviously I can help you in the class anyway. So take it easy, have a good one, and I will see you soon.